think John mentioned that last year, 2024 election, that issue one was the most important issue on the ballot. But I would say that there's no coincidence that our low turnout areas are in the, I'll say, underserved or the impoverished areas, right? So we had two initiative petitions circulating last summer, and that was the gerrymandering petition and the raise the minimum wage petition. Now, a lot of our organizations put 200% into getting signatures for the gerrymandering issue. But a lot of our organizations didn't lift a finger to get minimum wage raised on the ballot. Okay? And you'd be surprised how many members of a union who makes $12.50, $13 an hour, who probably would have come out to vote if they would have had something that they can see some value in on the ballot. Because see, if I'm trying to feed my family, lines on the ballot don't matter. So what I'll say is this: if we want to increase turnout, maybe we should consider putting something on the ballot that includes the visa price. And I know that people, not politicians, are gearing up to get the gerrymandering issue back on the ballot. So I would suggest that we may have a conversation with Fair Wage Ohio to do the same thing, because they did it on the last time. Not only that, and I'm just going to be honest with you, the state party, Cuyahoga County party, the AFL-CIO, and a lot of our labor unions didn't lift the finger to get signatures to put that minimum wage on the ballot. Okay? And when I asked about why that was, that we didn't lift the finger to the labor community, you know what the answer was? Fair Wage Ohio said that they didn't want our help. But it raises the question, how do an organization like the AFL-CIO, that a Johnny-come-lately organization like Fair Wage Ohio, dictate to them what's conducive for working people?
Thanks, Mike. You're 100% right. I wanted to just agree completely with Mike Seals. I was far more in favor of fair wage and raising the minimum wage. I'm, by the way, Dave Brock, the chair of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. I disagree with the notion that we did all of that the year before, as Mike was a part of, as Tom, so many of you, when we collected signatures to get a portion on the ballot. So I agree with Mike, because again, people say gerrymandering is the most important thing, in part because of what Mike says. People vote viscerally, thus Trump is winning. Two, I think even more important than gerrymandering is we have to make voting in this state easier. 26 states have.
We're making progress in breaking through. So I guess my answer is show up, fight like hell, and persist. And the more that working people and Democrats do it, show up, are effective and consistent, the harder it is to get sidelined and ignored. It's a little bit like in a baseball game, somebody hits a lazy chopper, sprint to first base, because sometimes you actually make it. So we got to all believe and do it. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and I'd like to compliment, I guess, the labor side, the party side. Nobody's got the answer, but I'll tell you who doesn't. Not the left coast, not the other left coast. It's the Democratic Party and the credibility with working people is going to come back from places like Ohio and the Midwest. And the playbook that the national donors in New York and California have, maybe it works for some voters in Bay Village. Love you, Bay Village, if you're here. But not enough. Not in our state, right? So we're going to have to do it from the ground up, and nobody's got the answer, but maybe we can show the way. So I guess I would like to say, if the labor leadership has a plan or an issue you need to work on, let's do this again. Let's do it consistently. I'd show up to a training, because I'm no expert, but I'd like to be a student, and I'd like to be your ally. And to Mr. Seals, you're hitting on an important point. I think the core of the Democratic Party has to be African American voters and labor. And by the way, those two things overlap with Coalition Black Trade Unions. Crucial group. If that was our engine, think of how we would design our campaigns differently. It wouldn't be 6 weeks of campaign, here's some money to Cleveland's East Side. It would, the whole issue's agenda would look different. Also for labor too. Now, we don't get to control all those things nationally, but we could start doing it locally, right? Go ahead. Go. Right.
All right, one more.
All right, sorry. Chris Hart, City Council, former union organizer. And Mike was right. He was at SEIU and I was at Acorn when we were putting minimum wage on the ballot in 2006. But we also were registering voters. We registered 100,000 people statewide leading into the 2006 election. When we gave low-income voters something to vote for, they went out and elected Ted Strickland. It was the last time we got a Democrat elected as the governor of Ohio in, 35 years or something, right? So giving people issues that they actually care about is important electorally. But I have a question more for the union perspective because I want to go back to what Bill said, which is that we are absolutely losing the media war. We cannot control our own narrative to save our goddamn lives. Like, the Fox News pundits will run the most heinous, obscure, there are more pictures of Trump and Jeff Epstein together than there are trans athletes in the NCAA, right? This is a fact, right? Yet they will have America on pins and needles for the rest of their lives about a trans person swimming against your little girl, right? They will control that narrative. The unions, however, have had some success in getting out in front of the media narrative in recent years after losing for decades, and we actually see young people with very favorable opinions of unions. So my question to you all is, what do you think we can do as a party to get out in front of the mainstream media? I agree with Donald Trump on two things, and one of them is the MSM sucks. The media is just horrible in this country. And how do we get out in front of it? You guys have had some success. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, to me, if you can't explain it to somebody that doesn't already support you in 2 or 3 sentences, forget it. You can't help anybody if you don't get in office. And if you're going to tie yourself down to a polarizing viewpoint or position, you're not going to be able to help people. I mean, people can say what they want, but if you can't explain it, you can't sell it. You guys tell me, I don't know.
One thing it takes messaging 365 days. The reason why the Republicans have been so successful is they are paying millions and millions of dollars for people to care about your daughter swimming against, a trans person or whatever. And they're constantly feeding your social media feeds, paying influencers to talk about those issues when they might not be the issues at the forefront. So one thing that we've been doing is talking about union core issues on social media, different places that the younger generation interact with one another, and actually paying to have some of that messaging break through. And that's what the party's going to have to start doing. The party's going to have to do it, or the independent side's going to have to start doing it in order for those counterpoints to be out there in the mainstream.
And we need people to just stand up and say something. Right? Democrats don't fight back. We get hit and we get attacked and we just, want to be the nice guy. But the thing about it is, Republicans, they be loud and they be wrong. And that's what people hear. When Sherrod was being attacked they're spending tens of millions of dollars against him, he didn't respond to those attacks until later in the campaign. And so we got to make sure that we are out there, we're talking about the issues, we don't understand the issues, we want to help educate you on them. Because they said, talk about workers, but sometimes the Democratic Party does not talk about all workers. They talk about a segment of the workers, and the other workers feel left out, and they're not being heard or being talked to. And so I think that one thing that I was really proud of with the North Shore Federation is that we had our candidate briefings. We start talking to candidates about what are the issues that impact labor, whether it's public sector, private sector, whether it's school boards, so that you can understand what the issues are. Because we had some folks that didn't understand that right to work wasn't a good thing. And they're sitting there on our questionnaire saying, support right to work. We're like, whoa, wait a minute. So now we understand that we did the first part of educating people on what are the common terms and the issues that we care about. Once that's done, we got to make sure we continue doing it so we don't have people who we consider friends advocating for legislation that's hurting our members. So what that does is then depress them from wanting to go out to vote. It depresses them when they don't hear things they care about being talked about. And so I think that we got to be able to fight back. I know that's one thing that a labor leader is not afraid to do. I have no problem in speaking up about the injustice. I have no problem speaking out when I see something that's wrong. But we got to make sure that we're not out there by ourselves, because sometimes we feel like when our friends should be there with us, they're not there.
Yeah.
Sure. Over the guy's Marquise, he was getting there. But we are if you heard me talk anywhere this year, you've heard me say we are in the middle of the biggest attack on unions in American history. President Trump earlier this year took away the bargaining rights of 1 million federal workers, and last week he celebrated Labor Day by taking rights away from even more workers. This isn't, here's what we're afraid is going to happen. This isn't a bill that passed that we're waiting to take effect. We're getting hosed right now. And if you are an elected official, it is time for you to speak up and defend your friends in organized labor. The amount of candidates, and Marquis talking about the candidate briefing, the amount of candidates who groaned and complained about this being part of the endorsement process, it's mind-boggling. So I think you reach out to the union leaders you know, you do what is within kind of your scope, what you're able to do legally and all that, and you just support the hell out of workers, and that's going to send a message. This is the time right now for Democrats to make it clear that they're the party of organized labor and of workers, and we're 8 months into this attack. So, and certainly, Councilman Harsh has been fantastic. But now's the time.
Yeah, a couple of questions back there from them fellows. Make it real quick, guys, because I still got a couple to talk.
6 years ago, I opposed the minimum wage at the National Health Conference. I don't believe in it. I believe in a living wage. No man or woman should have to work 2 and 3 jobs to support their family. Given the Ohio minimum wage, we keep up below the poverty level. We want to bring people up above the poverty level. So if you set your sights low, don't be disappointed when that's what you get. Start setting your sights a bit higher, and then you'll start encouraging people to go out and vote. The lowest turnout we had in the city of Lorraine the last election was 32%. The ward it was in was the poorest ward in the city. Whatever that $7 or $8 that Ohio by law says is your minimum wage, doesn't excite me for nothing. Start raising your objectives in the start getting the support.
I want to turn it over to Marquis Brown.
So Fred asked me to speak about public sector unions, and it's so good to see so many of our partners out there from so many different cities. I wish some of the chief executives showed up as well. But I think that some people forget about the fundamental principle of unions, right? So it's the fact that folks come together for collective good, right? To speak on, to have their voice to be heard. And the reason why I enjoy representing public sector unions is because, for the most part, my members live in the community they work in. And so they get up every day, and I have to remind some of the electeds that they get to elect their bosses. And if you don't treat them right, we have a couple of occasions made some switches in those bosses. But for me, we look at not just if you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent, we look about, are you going to be pro-worker? Because since becoming the director of Council Aid, I have been quite surprised at how many people who I thought were good Democrats who said they care about workers, but when it comes to putting the actions out there, it's not there. And we can all do a better job of having more conversations and making sure that you understand the issues. I don't think that we're going to always be on the same page on everything, but I want you to be able to understand where we are. Because the days of transactional relationships, I can't speak for every union, but I can speak for my union, is over. We are tired of asking our members to donate additional money from paying their union dues to our PAC, writing checks to elected officials, and then to be kind of kicked over and telling us to, get over it and wait your turn. Well, people are not willing to wait for years and years to come by. They want immediate results. And when you look at some of the turnout in some of these places, we know that when we talk to our members, when we educate them on the issues, and we talk to them about candidates that support their interests, they'll come out and vote. But at the same time, we need those candidates to uphold those promises they made to those members. Because right now, our members are feeling very apathetic. At the same time, I need to energize them to go out because we know this is going to be the attack of our lives. I know that right now we're facing layoffs in many places. The county has said they're having, freezes on employment. And I don't even want to know what's going to happen, after October, November, December, January. Because I want to make sure that people understand that we have to do all that we can to make sure we keep people employed in good jobs. So Fred asked me to talk about a couple of the pitfalls that I've seen in the public sector working with Democrats, or working with just elected officials in general, because there are some times when it makes me think about a candidate who's an independent or a Republican who we do not support, but they give our folks good contracts, they give them good raises, and they listen to them. And so sometimes we want to make sure that we're not being, taken for granted. So one thing is that when we said it's not a transactional relationship. I think that before we were so used to endorsing someone because they were the incumbent or endorsing them because they had a D behind their name, our members are asking more questions. Angie's in charge of our political action committee. They be asking questions like, when they do this, how's this going on? Or what about this? I saw this in the paper, how's this impacting us? We also want to make sure that we're not sitting there doing collective begging. We're doing collective bargaining. And now I can understand when a city doesn't have it, but when you do have it, and you make our members beg for it, but yet the next day you're coming to us asking us for a contribution, I have a problem with that. I feel very confident when I go to negotiations based upon my research and looking at what our economists say, what is a city, county, and municipality's ability to pay. Now, just because you don't want to pay, that's a different story. We can have that conversation. But we have cities that are sitting on tens of millions of dollars in reserves saying that we don't want to pay you a fair wage. So then I'm going back to tell my members, well, Republicans are saying this, but yet your boss is saying the same thing. Right? So they're saying like, well, why do you want to support this person? So we got to make sure that we're building more value in there, making sure that it is truly, truly a partnership. Everyone I work with, I let them know, like, I want to help solve problems. During COVID, we were very, upfront with our employers and said, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we save folks' jobs. I want to know what can we do to save folks' jobs. I want to make sure what can we do to make sure we have a conversation of keeping our members safe. And it's not just in COVID times. We have to look at our union members as partners, and the only time that we talk is not during collective bargaining. We have to talk year round because there are times when our members can let you know where the waste, the fraud, and abuse is at. Ask the question why we need 16 managers and we have fewer people on the front lines. Why all these friends are being hired And then our folks are sitting there like, wow, we only got a 2% this year. The other thing that we want to be involved in is of making sure that we have a say in what we do. Because at the end of the day, when someone just unilaterally implements something, you're not going to get the buy-in from the members that are there. And therefore, they're going to be rebellious about what's going on there. Now, they may not like the outcome, they may not like what you're doing, but when you bring them along, we can have that conversation and come to the realization that maybe we don't like A, B, or C, but it's in the best interest of making sure, one, that we can keep folks employed, we can make sure that residents are getting good quality services, that at the end of the day, we're doing what's in the best interest for not only ourselves, but also for the community in that jurisdiction. Other thing is that, being part of a union that has such a rich history in social justice, after President Biden signed the Juneteenth into a federal holiday, Fred and I were fighting with a mayor about why our bargaining unit members should have Juneteenth, but they gave it to all non-bargaining unit members. And I have to remind that mayor, but I didn't think that anyone on the non-bargaining unit staff was African American, but Fred and I have African American members in our bargaining unit, and we're sitting there begging for a Juneteenth holiday. Now, it shouldn't have taken 2 and 3 meetings for that to occur. It should have been, this is the right thing to do, and we're going to do it. I'm with you there. The other thing is that, one thing that for us is that we continue organizing. Because there are so many workers out there that want to have a union to represent them, and so many want to have their voices heard. And we often ask for support from our elected officials, because at the end of the day, people do care what you say, what you think, and we can say, are asking you, just do the right thing. We're not asking you to write a very heavy-hitted letter. We're asking you, hey, do 1 or 2 things. If the majority of the people here want to unionize, we ask you to do 1, is to stay neutral, or 2, give them voluntary recognition. We have some elected officials that refuse to do that because they don't want to upset the employer. Well, hell, what are you saying to workers that you don't even want to help them unionize so they can get better wages, so they can pay their bills, they can live in your community, they can shop in your community, they can pay taxes in your community to help you with your tax base. So again, we want to make sure that this is a partnership, because if you have a fight and you call me, I want to be able to tell our members, this is what we got to get behind this person. They were there for us, we're going to be there for them. We might not get along on every single issue, but when it matters, they stood up for you, and we need to stay up for them. And the last thing that I know is talked about a lot, and especially now, is looking at outsourcing and privatization. And a lot of times, the first thing that electeds want to do is look at how can we save costs by doing privatization and do outsourcing. It is not cheaper. I can assure you it's not cheaper. They're going to come to you, they're going to lie to you, they're going to tell you that the lowest, most responsive bid, and then a year later they're going to jack up the price, and then you're going to have people maybe out of work. So I encourage you, before we even get to that level, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out how can the work be done in a way that can protect the integrity of the work and the folks at the shop. And the last one, I promise, is final and binding arbitration is final and binding. When we have, again, people we think are our friends decide they want to have an arbitration decision overturned, it is almost impossible to have it overturned if it's not fraud in that case. But we have some jurisdictions that are very notorious that regardless of what the arbitrator rules, they will then go to court to ask for the judge to throw that out. And I have 2 examples where this occurred, where a $35,000 back pay ended up being over $150,000 because that employer took forever going to court, and luckily that individual member didn't have to pay any attorney fees because our union covered the cost. But that was a lot of things that could have been spent on getting people out to vote, educating them on what's going on, and making sure that we can have better engagement. I'm gonna give it over to Brian so we can get in. If there's any questions, I would gladly entertain them.
We've covered a lot of topics here. I'd like to talk a few minutes because we are talking to a lot of candidates, but specifically rank and file Democrats, what you can do to be supporting unions right now. And first and foremost, what comes to mind is I talked a little bit about federal workers losing their bargaining rights. Well, there's a bill in Congress to restore those rights. It has 222 co-sponsors. A handful of them are Republicans, and a bunch of them have signed on to a discharge petition to force a vote on that bill. We have been meeting with Congressman Miller and Joyce because Chantal Brown, of course, is supporting this bill. But look up HR 2550 and give Miller and Joyce a call. And call on them to restore bargaining rights. Because this bill's been floating around for a couple months now. They're back in D.C. now. It's time to move on this bill. So, a simple action you can take. I think some of the other things, and we talk about it to different clubs when we go to speak, keep an eye out for those picket lines. If you see a group of workers standing on the side of the road, stop and ask questions before you drive through that parking lot. We had the issue, and I guess going back to some elected officials, but when Valley View was on strike, the machinists at Valley Ford Truck were on strike for 13 weeks. And maybe 12 weeks in, we decided to do a day of action, and that was the day that a Cleveland City worker decided to cross the picket line to drop off a truck. Fortunately, that union, they gave us a call, and within a couple hours, the city sent a flatbed in to take all their trucks off that lot. That's getting stuff done. That's a meaningful outcome to what was, quite the slap in the face. So keep an eye out for picket lines. We always talk about buying union when you can. Come to union events like this, and I want to thank all the folks that are here tonight. We should give them all a round of applause. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure it does with everybody else on the panel that you came out to Brook Park tonight. But continue to show up for us. And the other thing I'll add is, it's not enough to say, I'm a Democrat, of course I support unions. That's not enough. We need you to be proactive in your support for us. When we're being criticized, we need you to defend us. And I add this, that this isn't a one-way street. It's not the head of the Labor Council asking you to do all this for us. Your Central Labor Council here knocked $92,000 doors last year, probably 95% of them for Democrats. Maybe a handful for Tom Patton, who's a union member. So it's not a one-way street. Our organization is supporting the Democratic Party still, and our members that vote at a rate 10 to 15% higher than non-union voters. So I think I'll stake that claim. But Fred, what else do you need from me?
You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Before we go, I got you. I'm gonna get her. I want to get her. Before we go, I want to thank President Wilma Smith, her executive board, and this entire local for hosting. Great job, my grandfather local. I love this. I love being here. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank everybody for caring enough to be here. This relationship matters. That's why my all-star panel here, I got two guys come up from
Columbus. And that's a big deal. This matters. This relationship matters. We're fighting for the soul of our country. You know, whatever differences we got, we gotta find common ground to get this done. Thank you.
My name is Insun, for anybody who doesn't know me already. And I was not going to ask this, but Ryan brought up the attack on federal bargaining rights right now. So my question is, in light of what Ryan mentioned about the attack on federal collective bargaining rights, and knowing that we have antiquated laws and that we have inconsistent judicial opinions and uncertain judiciaries, and that we know HR 2550 is just floating around right now, what do collective bargaining rights look like in the future? 6 months from now, 12 months from now, and at the end of this administration? Will they still exist, and in what capacity?
We could be here for another hour. Who wants that? I mean, what's that? Yeah, I mean, look, we're in the fight of our life, right? I can't say for sure. I know, we've lost, federal workers have quite a large amount of them have lost their bargaining rights, so we haven't even been able to figure out what the new count is. We know at the state level, right to work bill was brought up earlier this year and hasn't moved. So these threats are serious, the threats are real. But what I'll say is, of a more pressing concern for me and countless union members that are experiencing it right now is that what they're doing in DC and at the State House, they took away the bargaining rights for university professors, has sent the signal to employers here locally that they can do whatever the hell they want when it comes to workers' rights. And so you've got respected nonprofits, the Cleveland Rate Crisis Center, Connect, Signal Ohio, fighting organizing efforts. You've got Teamsters on strike. How many weeks now? Is this week 12 at Airgas? Employer in this community. You got, I mean, we could go on and on, having in the public sector. Cities doing it. So it has sent the signal that it's open season for organized labor, and it is a serious problem. And if folks, know the folks who serve on these boards or who are involved in these different groups, it's time to speak up. And we're going to continue to ask elected officials to step up. Yeah. Sure.
Marcia McCoy, Cleveland, Ward 1. My question is, I didn't come to a meeting just to come to a meeting. What's the action plan? Everything starts at the precinct level. So, labor union members, how many precinct committee members do you have, or would you like to have us do the training on? Thank you very kindly.
I can add that right now, and Dave or Rebecca might be able to fact check me, but about a quarter of the central committee members come from the union household. That's a great start. There's a ton of vacancies. If there's union folks in the house that would be interested in serving on their central committee, let us know.
So, plans are to have at least 2 more. We're going to move around geographically, regional halls, and we're going to have a Zoom meeting later this week, next week, to decide who the panelists will be, where we're going to go, and so on and so forth, and then we'll publicize the hell out of it. Thanks to Chairman Brock, he was a big help with this.
I'm not sure if I'm last, but it feels good to be towards the end here. I'm Tom Dufour, I'm a city council person here in the city of Brook Park. Thank you. Thank each and every one of you guys for coming to our city and having this here. Fred, thank you for having this as the initiation of this movement here. Because this is important, right? It's important that everyone's here. My question is this: what can we do as elected officials, as people in the community that care about labor, to help encourage other organizations, other businesses to get involved in labor movement, to help organize workers, to help get people involved in labor, and help fight for things like fair wages and better working conditions. All the things that come along with a union membership. Thanks.
So I grabbed the mic, so I guess I'm obligated to answer first. But before I do that, and I'm glad you stood up, Tom, I always like to recognize good behavior. And one of the things that we always talk about in the labor movement is if you have a question, engage the labor that understands the answer. I want to call out good behavior. Tom reached out to me about 3 months ago. He'd been approached by an advocacy organization and just had some questions about rail and rail safety at the national level. He was asked to sign on to a letter. So that's it. That's all we ask, is if there's a question that you have, reach out to the people that know. And then to your question, I would say, talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about why the labor movement is important. Talk about why it benefits business. I mean, I think that's one thing that we do a really poor job of in terms of countering big businesses' arguments is every other asset and every other resource that you use in a business, you negotiate a contract for. Why should labor be any different? And I can speak about my labor more expertly than anybody else's labor, but in the rail industry, if you need 5 humans, you know what 5 humans cost. And if you need 6, it's just 1 more. You know, I can't wrap my head around why that doesn't make good business sense, and why we don't kind of start and end the conversations with labor like that. So I'll pass the mic down to people that are probably better able to answer that question as King Nick.
I'm going to put somebody on the spot. Carolyn, you got the mic? I gotta ask a guy to do something for me. Mr. McCaffrey, will you speak to responsible contractor? I mean, that's a big deal locally.
Absolutely. The lowest price contractor is often not the best quality. Right? When you're using taxpayer money to build a project, there's good incentive to use union labor because you get the best quality at the best value. The projects come in, there were independent studies conducted recently, they're on our UA website. Union labor comes in better on budget, more on time, and safer, and higher quality. So that's what the taxpayers are getting. For a little more money, you get a lot better value. Something that lasts, some of the last generations, won't fall apart, won't require go-backs, which are hugely costly. That's the value of having responsible contractor language at the city level. When you have city money spent, prevailing wage, right? When there's public dollars involved, there should be prevailing wage paid to all the workers. Local labor should be used. I can't tell you how many projects happen. There were school projects where guys come up from Texas to do the fire protection on a school project. So you're using Ohio money, municipal money to pay guys from Texas. Where's that tax money going back? It's going back to Texas, right? Instead of keeping the benefits in your community. So there's a lot of incentives to use responsible contractor language, to get in your city ordinance, and to use union labor prevailing wage provisions. City of Cleveland just passed prevailing wage on any project over $500,000. That was a huge accomplishment with Mayor Pitt. It was awesome to see. So you're getting value out of your tax dollars. That's responsible contractor language.
Hey, Fred.
Carolyn, is this a wrap?
Well,
Carolyn says I gotta go. Thank you, everybody.